What's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday, and it's going to be a little bit warmer today. Actually, quite a bit warmer. Uh, Currently 15 degrees, which is already higher than all it was yesterday. Going to be high around 28, sometime around 3 p.m. With snow this evening. It's got a 90% chance of snow around bedtime. Um, but in 7:26 is the sunrise, and 4:22 is the sunset. So we are gaining a minute. Let me throw in my earbud here because I think the mic helps. I'm all to pieces this morning. Hang on. All right, there we go. And so we gained a minute on the daylight as well, and a waning gibbous. So that means the moon itself, what we see, is going to be shrinking, going into a new moon. So we're starting a study of Galatians, and we're just kind of taking a look at the culture and what Paul was going through when he was trying to establish these churches. And we looked yesterday at the map of southern Galatia. I'm going to try and turn there again. I did not do well with that yesterday, but kind of came out blurry. Actually, it's better with this light off. But we're talking down here, right? And when we're gonna pick up, we're gonna be in Iconium to start. Then we're gonna come in here to Lystra and Derby. Now, notice if you look at the compass rose, we're talking about pretty much 100 miles. All right, it's maybe a little. Well, that's hard to do upside down. Yeah, about 100 miles, right? These cities are 100 miles apart, and the culture is very diverse. Okay, it's very diverse, and I'm, I was looking for good pictures for the wallpaper thing, and what a lot of when you look up cultural diversity, a lot of what you see is color difference, different color folks, and culture is much more than color of the skin, right? Like I felt like those were so um, narrow-minded in their representation of culture, because you know there if I was if you think about Cubans, right? Just that Cuban nationality, are some are uh, as dark as African Americans or Africans, even if they're not in America, or and some are as uh, light and as white as the Irish or the Italian. Okay, so that it's much more. Uh, Culture is much more than just color, right? Color of our skin. Um, and so I think those are misrepresentations of culture, but culture is impacted by politics, right? Politics. Okay, Mr. Least, hello. Um, and Paul and Barnabas, and when he's establishing these churches, he's being impacted um, by the culture of the areas. And so, picking up in Acts chapter 14, so he's in Iconium, that's verse 1, and he entered the synagogue of the Jews together and spoke in such a manner that a large number of people believed, both of the Jews and of the Greeks. Now, it says in verse 2, but unbelieving Jews instigated and embittered the minds of the Gentiles against the brothers. So here, the culture, right, has a heavy Jewish influence. They're swaying, the Jews are swaying the minds of the Greeks, okay, against the brothers, against the gospel. And so, as a Christian here in America, these things happen to us all the time, right? The culture of the community, a Democrat, Republican, conservative community, right? A community with a lot of resources, a community without a lot of resources, a community that um, feeds into the school systems, a community that doesn't, right? There's um, a lot that goes into the influence of a community. Okay, and so what's he do? He says, therefore, they spent a long time there speaking boldly with what? Reliance upon the Lord. There's only one way a Christian can prevail in these communities, in any community, and that's with reliance on the Lord. And how do you do it? By speaking, and as by speaking boldly, what he says, testifying to the word of his grace. Your testimony, okay? Your testimony is cross-cultural. It's God's grace is multicultural, and how he impacts everyone's life, right? Praise Jesus. Yeah, how he impacts everyone's life, okay? And that testimony breaks down barriers. Hello. Hey, good morning. He breaks down barriers, okay? But it says the multitude of the city was divided, and some sided with the Jews and some sided with the apostles. And when an attempt was made by both the Gentiles and the Jews with their rulers to mistreat and stone them, they became aware of it and fled to the surrounding cities of Lycaonia, Lystra, and Derbe, barely 100 miles away. Okay, barely 100 miles away. Now look, here, here's what the gospel can do, both in the positive and in the negative way, is unite cultures. It said, but the city was divided. All right, some sided with the Jews and others with the apostles, and when an attempt was made by both the Gentiles and the Jews. So now the attempt, right? The attempt um, to stone them, to kill them, was united and cross-cultural as well. See, the enemy is multicultural as well. Yeah. And so the to combat that, right? To combat that, we testify of the grace, right? And that grace and that testimony and what he's done in our life is a miracle. It's miraculous. Okay? And so they left and continued to proclaim the gospel. All right, continue. We have to continue. So there we see the okay. Uh well, yeah. Don't waste your todays. Give no thought for tomorrow. Today has enough problems of its own, right? Yeah, that was Jesus taught that. Um, so then he moves into Lystra. All right, chapter 14 and verse 8. So in 1 through 5, we saw a more heavily influenced Jewish culture, and they were able to impact the minds of the Gentiles. Now here, verse 8, and in Lystra, a man was sitting who had no strength in his feet, lame from his mother's womb, who had never walked. This man listened to Paul. Notice the word, faith come by hearing, hearing by the word. He listened to Paul as he spoke, who, when he fixed his gaze on him, saw that he had faith to be saved from being lame. Now, we should all have this faith now. And yes, he did say, stand up with a loud voice, stand up, on your feet, and he leaped up and began to walk. And that is a sign miracle. And if if you watch these videos of people like um, altering the length of somebody's legs and all that stuff is staged. That stuff is fixed. It's not like that. Those types of sign miracles were for the establishment of the church, the building up of the foundation. That stuff doesn't happen. Okay, it's fake, right? I'm just gonna say it like that. It's fake. Okay, but the sign miracle that we do have going back is the testimony of the grace that he gives us and what he's done in your life, and bringing you from the spiritually lame, which does impact you physically, by the way, all right, into the spiritually upright on your feet. Because without that, and that is the biggest miracle, sign miracle that I see in my life, and I've had physical miracles too. You know, there's he does answer prayer, y'all, and we should have that faith to know that through the power of prayer, if it be His will, He can save us from being lame. If that be His will, He can through the power of prayer, but not by me being like, get up and walk. I don't have that authority. Okay, I don't have that authority. So then he says, um, when when the crowds saw what Paul had done, they raised their voice by saying in the Laconian language, the gods have become like men and have come down to us. And they began calling Barnabas Zeus and Paul Hermes because he was the chief speaker. So here we see a heavily Greek influenced culture, not but 100 miles away from where they were, right, in Laconium. And so now they're thinking through a totally Greek um, eye, a Greek lens, and they're calling them by their gods, right? And the priest of Zeus, whose temple was just outside the city, brought oxen and garlands to the gates and was wanting to offer sacrifice with the crowds. But when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard of it, they tore their clothes, they tore their garments, and rushed out into the crowd, crying out and saying, Men, why are you doing these things? We are also men of the same nature as you. See, we're all men. We're all men of the same nature, a sin nature. And the thing that makes us different is grace and my testimony, right? And that is how we combat these multicultural responses to the gospel, the multicultural opposition of the gospel that is um, uh, used by Satan and the demonic traps and snares and schemes to influence people against the gospel, against the grace, against you and me, Christian, against the Christian home, right? Against the uh, it's not a culture, but against the way of life, of living a gospel filled life, a Bible centric life, a Jesus centric life. Being able to do that, it's the testimony of your grace permeates through any culture. And in that, we should not be ashamed. We should not be ashamed to testify of how He brought us, made us be able to jump up and leap out of this lame state into a state of um, spiritual and physical, strength. Okay, we should be able to do that, and it should be a burden on us that when we see it, we should be able to run out into the crowd. Uh, Proverbially, don't go run out to into a crowd in this culture and tear your clothes and think you're going to get a response like this. No, right? We have to appropriately interact with the culture of the time. Okay? We have to appropriately interact with the culture of the time. Paul said, to the Jew, I am a Jew, and to the Greek, I am a Greek. Okay, that is how we have to be. Okay, crafty as a serpent, gentle as a dove. That's how we have to be. Okay, and we do that going back to sharing the testimony of his grace. Penetrates through any cultural uh, influence that is either for or against the gospel. Okay, the testimony of his grace, right? The testimony of his grace. And just to finish up, what we testify is like this. Um, we are men of the same nature, proclaiming the gospel to you, that you should turn from these vain things to a living God who made the heaven and the earth and the sea and all that is in them. Okay? And all that is in them. In the generations gone by, he permitted all the nations to go their own ways, and yet he did not leave himself without witness. That's our testimony. He didn't leave himself without witness. I'm just a witness for him. Just a witness for him. Okay? And that witness will carry, right? It will carry through all nations. Right? They go their own way, but not without witness. Not without witness. All right, you guys. Hey, have a wonderful day. Tomorrow we'll jump into the book of Galatians. Now that we have the framework for what Paul, the culture and the influence, and what the people, the reader of Galatians would be feeling, seeing, hearing when he unpacks this letter. Okay? All right, you guys. Praise the Lord. Have a wonderful day. Grace and peace. Testify. Testify of the wonderful grace that the Lord has had on your life. Amen.